This is the lecture for Ancient and Medieval History for Friday, the 5th of March, in the year of our Lord 2021. So, Gaius Caligula, the Emperor Little Bootsy, is dead. And the Praetorian Guard and the German mercenaries that guard Gaius Caligula have found a new emperor to forestall Cassius Chaerea's attempt to reestablish the Republic. And the reason that the Praetorians do this is because the Praetorians' purpose in life is to guard the palace and protect the emperor. If there's no emperor, they're out of a job. They have to go back to the regular army, and when they go back to the regular army, they're going to have to work for a living again. The Praetorian Guard is a cushy job. It's a well-paying job. And it's a job where your purpose is political, to fight the political enemies of Rome. Whereas the Roman legionaries in the regular army, their job is to suppress rebellion, fight barbarians and Parthians, and maybe even expand the empire. They have to do real soldiering. So the Praetorians, and to a lesser extent the German mercenaries that are there for Caligula too, the Praetorians have every interest in having an emperor. So when they find Claudius hiding behind the curtain of the palace, their opportunity is right in their hands, and they take it. They grasp it. They hoist Claudius on their shoulders and proclaim him emperor. And suddenly, the rest of Rome is faced with this. The only organized army units of any scale have just proclaimed a new emperor. Cassius Chaerea may have been the Praetorian prefect, the head of the Praetorian Guard under Caligula, but he just killed Caligula. And it is arguable that his act was an act of treason. So what do most people do in a case where there's a sudden political crisis? They cover their backsides. They protect themselves. They get defensive. They want to hold on to what they have. They don't want to take unwarranted risks, which is, by the way, not the habits of a free people. That's the habits of a people that's used to being taken care of. Being risk-averse is not the same thing as being brave, and freedom belongs to the brave, not the risk-averse. That is a harsh truth, but it is true, at least throughout human history and contemporary politics today. So the people of Rome and the rest of the Praetorian Guard that's either not personally loyal to Chaerea or not personally with the guys that just proclaimed Claudius, is they're going to do what they think is going to give them the least amount of problems and the most amount of safety, and that is they proclaim Claudius emperor, and they join with the Praetorian Guard. Cassius Chaerea and his fellows saved Rome from the madness of Caligula. Who knows where that madness would have gone? But they are hunted down and killed as traitors because the Praetorian Guard has picked a new emperor, and that new emperor cannot allow the people who killed the last emperor to live, even though he understands why they did it. Now, Claudius is emperor. As I said, he spits, he drools, he farts. He has a club foot, he has a limp, he has a gimpy arm. He doesn't move well, he shuffles rather than walks. He is not good looking, he is sort of goofy looking. He has problems. And everyone, from Augustus, more as negligence than anything else, to Tiberius, who had utter contempt for him as a weakling, to Caligula, who enjoyed tormenting his old uncle Claw. Everyone thought Claudius was a moron, idiot. They ignored his books of history on the Etruscans and on Hannibal and on other things because they probably assumed he had a ghostwriter. They probably assumed it wasn't really his ideas. However, when Claudius becomes emperor, he's going to prove them all a little bit silly and wrong. Now, rumor has it that Claudius wanted a restoration of the Republic. But when it became clear that the Republic could only be restored with his death, he also made a pragmatic decision not to die. Plus, he came to believe that the Romans of his day were not fit to rule themselves. They were so willing to let strong men rule, and he is ruling about 100 years after Caesar's assassination. Claudius is not prepared to let the country decline into another bout of civil wars. So reluctantly, he accepts the imperium and does a reasonably good job for especially the first 2/3 of his reign. He restores fiscal sanity. He restores a decent budget. He solves the money problems that Caligula made. He does so without making any animals into politicians. He does so without waging war upon the oceans. He does so without turning the female aristocrats of Rome into prostitutes. He does so in a very workmanlike, businesslike fashion. Claudius, like Tiberius in his early years, is actually a good emperor in that he is a trustworthy administrator who keeps peace and prosperity for the majority of the known world. It's an important job, and Claudius does it, and he does it reasonably well. Now, Claudius does want to solve a problem that's been plaguing the empire and get a little glory to boot. Along the northern coast of Gaul, on what we now call the English Channel and North Sea coasts, the Celts of Britain have been raiding and joining with druidical guerrillas inside Gaul itself. The Romans have been working since Caesar's conquest, to Romanize the Celts, to make them civilized in the Roman style, to bring them into the towns, intermarry with them, and make them part of Rome's society and Rome's economy, make some of them Romans through, allowing them to earn citizenship, all this stuff. But every bit of this Romanization plan, which we'll talk about, is put at risk by the Celts of Britain, the Britons, raiding in and stirring up the old anti-Roman hatreds and trying to build spy networks built around druid nature priests. How do you solve this problem? Well, one way is to conquer Britain, the island. Not like Julius in a raid, but for keeps. So Claudius organizes an army group whose purpose is to cross the English Channel and conquer as much of southern Britain as they can. The army crosses the Channel successfully, lands, and marches northward and inland from the Channel coast of Britain, what we now call southeastern England. The tribes fall before the Roman onslaught, just as their Gallic relatives had fallen in Gaul 100 years before. Once again, the magic power of woad, a bright blue paint, a bit like the color of this shirt, is pitted against Roman steel body armor. And as fearsome looking as the blue-painted naked warriors with the red spiky clay hair are, charging down naked, screaming like banshees, as horrifically emotionally scary as that is, the Romans do their job. They slice and dice, they hide behind their shields, they use their armor, and they conquer. they conquer. Claudius himself is going to go to Britain and see things firsthand. He wants to see the chariot riders, because chariots are outmoded on the European continent, but the Britons still use them. So Claudius leaves Rome and goes north and crosses the Channel, and actually is there for a battle or three against the Britons. He obviously doesn't personally take part in the fighting, because he's the emperor, he's old, and he's feeble in body, but he does make some commands, and he is there in the moment. Who's not there is his wife. The wife of Claudius, well, she's not the first wife. When Claudius was a young man, his parents made a marriage alliance with an Etruscan aristocratic family, and he was married to a woman called Urganilla. Urganilla was everything Claudius wasn't. She stood a head and a half taller than he did. She is one of these muscular women, like an Amazon. And when they got married, there was Urganilla in the bridal gown, and here was Claudius, trembling and feeble. And the family laughed because it was so very funny, the Phoebe and the Amazon. Urganilla made it clear that Claudius was not to step out of line with her, or she'd kill him with her bare hands. And so they lived separately, and he didn't get in her way. And when it came time to divorce her, he did so. Briefly, he was married to Lucius Aelius Sejanus' sister, who was his wife because Claudius, when faced with problems before he became emperor, was not like an oak. He didn't stand up to the wind. Claudius was like a willow branch. He bent with the wind. He was a survivor. So Sejanus was in the ascendant, and Sejanus suggested a marriage alliance between his family and the imperial family through Claudius. And so Aelia, Sejanus' sister, was married to Claudius, and Urganilla was divorced, and that was all okay. But because it was Claudius who was the one that brought the pornographic scroll with the evidence against Sejanus, Claudius himself was not targeted. However, Sejanus' sister... So Claudius is unmarried, and Caligula becomes emperor. And remember, little Bootsy has a sense of humor. So Caligula finds the most beautiful 16, 17-year-old girl of a Roman aristocratic family. I mean, absolutely magnificently beautiful, everyone says. Her name is Valeria Messalina. And Valeria Messalina is married to Claudius in a tragicomic wedding ceremony presided over by the Emperor Caligula, who turned it all into a big joke. Oh, it's humiliating. Look at this beautiful, beautiful young girl who could have married anyone. And she's married to this old, feeble, drooling wretch of a man. Ha ha! Again, humor is nasty sometimes. But Caligula does die because of his sense of humor, so there is some justice in the world. Now, this beautiful, vivacious young woman in her late teens and then her early 20s is stuck with this old man. But he's the emperor. That means she's the empress. She begins to play Claudius like an instrument, getting him to give her more and more power, independence, autonomy, all in the name of having her help him rule, having her take some of the burden of the imperium off his heavily burdened shoulders. He loves her. He trusts her. He goes along with it. She has affair after affair under his nose, but she has to be discreet because he's the emperor. As to the people that could have told him about this, They're afraid that he knows and approves of it because he's too old to please her, and she's got all of these needs and yada yada. And people's marriages, especially in the Roman aristocracy, can be kind of weird. So nobody tells him. And then he goes to Britain, and she loses all restraint. Now, Roman law says that nobody can parade around buck naked. So she parades around wearing a ribbon in her hair. That's it. She's the empress. She's beautiful. She's naked. She's walking the streets of Rome with her retinue around her, completely naked, because she finds it amusing. She also decides to challenge the chief prostitute in all of Rome to a contest. Now, it's not going to be about gardening. In 24 hours, who can lay with the most men? The Empress Valeria Messalina or the chief prostitute in all of the city of Rome? Well, in 24 hours, Valeria Messalina has 25 men, and the prostitute has 24. Whether or not that was a real victory, there is no way that a practical woman like the chief prostitute in all of Rome was going to ever, ever, ever humiliate the empress by beating her. So, this is Messalina. And it's just out there. Claudius comes back from Britain, and he's still kind of doofless. But Valeria Messalina has gotten used to her freedom. And her latest lover is a Roman senator of patrician family who actually himself could be an emperor or could restore the republic. But probably he's going to be the emperor. So Messalina, when Claudius is away visiting the port of Ostia, down the Tiber River on the shores of the Tyrrhenian Sea, marries. She divorces Claudius and marries this senator, this patrician, this military officer. And the marriage is a clear statement of intent that Claudius is too feeble to keep his own wife, and he has lost the imperium. He's not even in Rome to contest this. And so the flower of Rome's aristocracy goes to the wedding of Valeria Messalina and this senator, and the assumption is that they are in the process of taking the imperium. A loyal person gets word to Claudius about what the heck is going on. Claudius gets in touch with the army, he gets in touch with the Praetorian Guard, and before midnight, the wedding feast is interrupted by guards coming up the hill from all directions. The senator is killed. Many of the revelers are killed as traitors. And Claudius gets drunk. And while Claudius is drunk, his former slave chief advisor, who are freedmen, have him sign a death warrant for his wife. Why? Because they're afraid that sober, he'll never execute her. And it's her or them, because they're the ones that informed Claudius. In fact, without Claudius, they're out of work. And a slave who's out of work, or a former slave who's out of work in Rome, it can be a problem. So they get drunken Claudius to sign off on the death of his wife. His wife is executed, and Claudius finds out the next morning, in the midst of a hangover, that he signed the death warrant for this woman that he loves. Even though she betrayed him, he still loves her. Claudius changes after that. He becomes inward-looking, brooding. And then he makes a decision that seems nonsensical, almost Caligula-like. See, Claudius's brother was Germanicus. Claudius's father was Drusus. Those are the two men who fought in Germany. Claudius's nephew was Caligula. One of Caligula's sisters was killed by Caligula, who was his sister wife. But Caligula had other sisters. Claudius marries his niece, one of Caligula's other sisters. His niece begins taking power from Claudius, and he lets her. Now, Claudius has a son by Messalina called Britannicus. But after all of Messalina's messing around, is that really his son? Or is it the son of one of Messalina's countless lovers? When Claudius's niece's wife proposes that her son, by a prior marriage, Nero, be given the status of heir alongside Britannicus, Claudius doesn't object. When his niece's wife insists that Nero begin to be given superior status than Claudius's son Britannicus, Claudius allows it. To the point where when Claudius dies, it's clear that Britannicus is going to be shoved aside and that Nero will take over. Once that's all settled, his niece's wife feeds him a poisoned mushroom, and he dies. Now, why did he do all of this at the end? Well, it's possible that he just was brokenhearted. It's possible that his physical feebleness had finally begun to affect his mind. It's also possible that he thought that by bringing discredit upon the empire, maybe after his death there'd be a new republic, that Nero would be overthrown, that Nero was unsuitable. Nero was a bit of an artiste, if you understand my meaning. Nero thought of himself as the world's greatest artist, and Claudius didn't think that that would make a good emperor. So, Claudius, for whatever reason, either to bring discredit upon the empire or because he was no longer in control of himself, allowed his niece's wife to take over, and then she kills him. Or he dies of old age, of food poisoning, accidentally. Now we have Nero, the greatest artist ever. He is a poet. He is an actor. He sings. He plays the lute. He even dances. Nero, what a gift to the world Nero's artistic genius is. Nero goes around the empire as emperor, giving performances. Think about this in terms of Rome, of dignitas and auctoritas and pietas and gravitas. This is none of that. Nero performs. He's an artist. His mom thinks, Claudius's old niece wife, that she's going to rule her son. Nero has her sidelined, killed. So Nero tours the empire, but what Nero really wants to do is express his artistic talent on the city of Rome itself. It is said of Augustus that he found Rome a city of brick and he left it a city of marble. And what that means is that Augustus built a lot of beautiful monuments, some of which still last into Rome today. Nero wants to out-Augustus in terms of building beautiful buildings. After all, he's the artist. He has the taste that Augustus never did, being a mere politician. The land Nero wants to use to build his new palace and his new Rome happens to be densely populated slum land. So, some of you may recall earlier stories about this. That very land suddenly catches on fire. Now, in Nero's time, Rome is a city of 5-story brick tenements called insulae, which are they're called islands in Latin. That's what insula means, an island. And these insulae are made of brick. They've got all sorts of flammable equipment. Fire is a constant danger in a city of the size of Rome. Rome has about 1 million people in Nero's time. It's a ridiculously huge city, especially a city that doesn't have modern amenities like electricity. It has a good water system, but it doesn't have pressurized water and fire hydrants. Because Rome is so densely populated, and because its buildings are not fireproof, if a fire starts here, it could spread for miles. It could consume the whole city. It might not be able to be stopped. You can have bucket brigades, but they're only going to do so much against a real fire. Suddenly, the very neighborhood that Nero wanted for his new palace is going to be burned. And the fire lasts all night into the next day. It is the Great Fire of Rome in the year 66. Rumor has it that while Rome burned, Nero played his lute and wrote poetry and sang songs about the compelling sight of the flames. Now, when I was a little kid, I was involved in the YMCA program, and we did summer camp. Well, one day, it was so rainy, instead of going to the campground on the edge of town, we went to the downtown YMCA building, and we were going to use the pool. While we were there, the lumber yard, a block and a half away, this is in Meriden, Connecticut, I think in 1975 or 1976, maybe 1974. The lumber yard across the street and down about half a block catches on fire. We were close enough to watch the fire grow. It is like nothing else you can possibly imagine. Seeing a giant fire. I am not a pyromaniac. I don't like fire. Fire scares me. But I would be lying if I didn't say I saw something remarkable in that. Remarkably horrific, remarkably destructive, but I saw a major fire that destroyed several city blocks. We were moved out of there, but it was because we were too close. Smoke began to become a problem, even upwind, which is where we were. The fire was a huge deal. And that was in a mill town of Meriden, Connecticut. It wasn't anything like the center of the world like Rome was. Countless Romans are killed. Countless more Romans are left homeless. The emperor claims the property for urban renewal. And instead of rebuilding the homes of the Romans, he clears them all away and is going to build exactly what he said he was going to build before. A new palace, some public buildings, to make Rome beautiful. The people of Rome are many things, but they're not stupid when it comes to politicians. They knew full well that the fire was likely set by the emperor or at his orders. It is just too packed, too convenient for the fire to have spread and started naturally in the exact spot Nero wanted to use. But instead of having to negotiate a price with thousands of Roman homeowners and having to organize the relocation of tens of thousands of Roman apartment dwellers, or maybe more, the fire just took it all, and as the emperor, he took the land for urban renewal. And those people are left homeless. This begins a grumbling campaign against the artiste emperor, who is so sensitive. Alarm bells are ringing because the people of Rome are blaming Nero. In a desperate move to try to deflect blame, Nero blames the Christians. They're a new cult out of the East They are cannibals, the rumors have it. They are sex fiends, the rumors have it. They long for the second coming of Christ, which is the destruction of the world as it is, which is the destruction of Rome. So they're traitors. They're not patriotic. They're a cult of terrorists. Nero calls them, and that cult burned Rome. Nero says, and as firebugs, and as traitors, and as arsonists, the Christian community of Rome will be destroyed. That is Nero's order. So, Christians are rounded up. Some Christians are fed to the lions in a pregame show before the gladiators' main event. Like if you watch sports today, and I don't watch, usually there's a pregame show where they talk about the game, what it means to the season, the various athletes, how they're doing, all this stuff. Back in the old days, when you went to the movies, you wouldn't just see the movie. There'd be a couple of cartoons, then there'd be a newsreel, then there'd be a short movie like from a film serial like Flash Gordon or Buck Rogers, sort of a half-hour episode that you'd get in the movie theater, and then you'd watch your movie, and maybe there'd be a second movie. So you could go to the movies at 10 or 11 in the morning and be there until almost sunset, because on a weekend day, because there's, again, cartoon. So the gladiator games are sort of like this. They start out with pregame shows. Sometimes they're executions. How are you going to execute so many women and children and men? I know. What we'll do is we will put them in the center of the arena, and we'll starve several of our lions. And we'll make them angry. I mean, our lions are angry anyway because they're there to kill gladiators. But these lions are going to be enraged, and they're going to be furiously hungry. And to start off events, we'll have these Christian men, women, and children waiting for them, and we'll let loose the lions, and the lions will do their thing. They'll just rip the Christians apart, and the Roman people will blame the Christians for the fire, and they'll see that the emperor is making justice happen, and they'll be less angry and less suspicious that he caused the fire. So many Christians are fed to the lions, part of bread and circuses, free entertainment and food provided by the emperor as a welfare program. The night streets of Rome are notoriously dark. They don't have streetlights. But the artist emperor has an idea. If you douse a Christian in flammable tar or pitch or sticky oil and strap them up onto a hook, you can light them on fire while they're still alive. And so on the street corners of Rome, after the Great Fire, in places that were not likely to cause another fire, they were careful about that, they would put Christians up as torches to light the night, different torch on a different street corner every night. And so Christians lit the way of Roman nocturnal wanderers for a while. Nero also orders the crucifixion of many Christians. And this is when Peter asks to be crucified inverted, and the Romans grant his wish because it's sick. And many Christians of Rome are killed that way through the same method that was used against Jesus. The Christian community had worshipped in the catacombs of Rome, the open underground graveyards where Rome places its dead. But the Imperial Secret Service is pretty thorough. It doesn't wipe out all the Christians, but it wipes out many of them. Many of them. Because Nero needs to deflect blame. It doesn't work. The fire and the aftermath, which causes the alarm, happens in the year 66. Less than 3 years later, Nero, on his way back from Rome, is hit by soldiers that want him dead. He retreats into a private home at a crossroads, and the soldiers that want him dead gut him. and it's probably a direct result of the fire. It's also a result of Nero just being like Caligula. Because he's an artist, he does these things that irritate the hell out of the people around him. And he does it without apology, because he's the emperor. He can do anything he wants. Again, these people have a terrible idea of leadership. Real leadership, is about service. These people think that leadership is about lording it over people. So Nero is dead. The Julio-Claudian line is over. Augustus, good, solid, strong emperor, founds the empire, most important emperor, just as George Washington is our most important president. Tiberius, good emperor at first, then crazy town. Caligula, crazy town from start to finish. Claudius, good emperor at first, and then sort of crazy town. Nero, artistically crazy town, and they're gone. In the year 69, the year of four emperors try taking the throne. The first is a Roman aristocrat named Servius Galba. But Servius Galba is a hard case. And basically he says once he's emperor, people have to obey him, and he does nothing to earn the loyalty of the people of Rome, or the Roman garrison, or the Roman army broadly, or anything else. He just starts sending out these nasty crabbed orders. Otho rises up, a Roman general, to fight Galba. Vitellius, sort of a fat pig Roman aristocrat, rises up to fight Otho. And in the east, the commander of the armies facing the Jewish rebellion, Flavius Vespasian, is proclaimed emperor. Well, Galba's emperor for a very short time, Otho for a very short time, Vitellius for a very short time. Vespasian leaves the rest of the conclusion of the Jewish war to his son Titus, and takes part of his army group in the east, which is the most powerful collection of Roman armies in the empire, and goes to Italy and becomes emperor. So the year of four emperors. And Vespasian founds the Flavian Dynasty, which is going to be himself, his son Titus, and his other son Domitian. Flavius presents himself sort of as a paisan. A paisan is what you call a fellow Italian from your old home village that you meet in America, thousands of miles away. Hey, paisan, how you doing? He's sort of a paisan. He doesn't present himself like an aristocrat. He's a farmer. He likes the feeling of dirt under his fingernails. He likes plowing the soil. He's an everyday guy. He likes watching the games. He also happens to be an incredibly sharp politician and general. Vespasian's reign sees the building of the Flavian Amphitheater, what we call today the Roman Coliseum. So this big stadium that still dominates Rome's skyline is built by Vespasian. Vespasian's reign also sees the explosion of the volcano Mount Vesuvius, destroying Herculaneum and Pompeii, which are resort towns along the Gulf of Naples. Mount Vesuvius is still overlooking major population centers in Italy. Now, when Vesuvius explodes, the people of Pompeii and Herculaneum basically are hit with a sudden disaster that they have no time to react to. They can get on a horse and ride. They're probably not going to outrun the pyroclastic stone falling from the sky and the ash falling from the sky. Pretty much anyone within a certain radius is dead. They just may not know it yet, but they're dead. Very alarming. So these resort towns are destroyed in less than half an hour. But many of them are not destroyed by lava flows or by the concussive blast of the explosions. They're destroyed by being covered in volcanic ash. Centuries later, I think in the 17 or 1800s, Italian stone quarrymen were working in that area, cutting away stone for use in building. And they begin finding these weirdly shaped holes in the rock. Well, the rock was made from the falling lava, compacting and solidifying. The holes were left by the bodies that had been flash buried in that ashfall. So you have people in positions of horror. Because what the stonecutters did is they told people, and people came in with plaster of Paris, and when they cut away the stone, they would have these plaster of Paris figures that were in the shapes of the people as they died. There was even a poor dog shape of a dog that was chained to a pole, and he was trying to get his chain off so that he could run as he was buried by the ashfall. It's horrific. But for archaeology, it's a treasure. Because not only do we get a sense of the size of the Romans and what they were doing at the moments of their death, but because these buildings were filled and covered by ash, they're preserved in a way that the rest of Rome's buildings are not. Throughout the Roman Empire, the Middle Ages, modern times, what happens is old buildings get damaged or destroyed. But not these. So today, there are relics of Pompeii and Herculaneum where you can see the very graffiti that the Romans painted all over their walls and the beautiful paintings on their walls and the kinds of things that they wrote and they said. And it's a city that is like a fly trapped in amber. That fly dies. The amber, which is the sap that it's eating, goes around it, envelops it, kills it, but solidifies around it as the gemstone amber. Pompeii and Herculaneum are like that. They are communities frozen in time. And if you want to learn how everyday Romans, well-to-do Romans, and also because they were resort towns, lived, go to Pompeii and Herculaneum. Titus destroys Jerusalem, including the temple, and orders the destruction of the Jews at Masada, which we talked about at the beginning of the year. And when Vespasian dies, Titus becomes emperor. Titus has a public relations department that just goes a little too far. Because Titus's most famous quote is, I haven't... Oh, what is it exactly? Today, I neglected to help a man. Any man. I have lost a day. Today, I have not helped a man. I have lost a day. So Titus, according to his public relations department, is all about helping people. And again, good, solid emperor. When Titus dies, perhaps under mysterious circumstances, his younger brother Domitian takes over. And Domitian is a brooding fellow, a bit like Tiberius. He has a temper. He gives vent to that temper. Because he is such a retributive, blaming, angry emperor, there are people who believe that he had his brother executed. In any event, Domitian rules. His rule provokes rebellion. He is a failed emperor, and he is ultimately killed and overthrown, and the first century principate ends with him. On Monday, we will talk about some of the characteristics of that principate, and then we'll move on to the second era of Roman imperial history, the Pax Romana. Remember to look at the syllabus to make sure of what is or may not be due this coming Monday, and have a good day. Have a good weekend.